Now let's start talking about the different data sources that you'll work with as a part of your MLOps pipeline. So you need to figure out where your data is coming from. It's gonna come from probably a few different places. Places like databases, these might be Postgres or maybe Microsoft SQL Server, or maybe even some NoSQL databases like MongoDB. But data can come from places like that. It could be raw data files stored in some type of S3 bucket or some type of container somewhere. It could be coming from third-party APIs, so somewhere like a Google API or Stripe API, or just somewhere where you get your data from. And then there's object storage, like an S3 bucket, or again, maybe some kind of storage in Azure or GCP. One thing to note as you gather all of these data sources is that you will need credentials for all of these sources. So make sure that as you discover where all of your data is coming from, that you update your credential manager. Now, that could be some type of service in AWS, maybe with IAM. It could be the credential manager in GCP. It could be some type of company's secret storage. Wherever it is, just make sure that as you get these data sources, you're adding those credentials to some central location. And then as you go through your data sources, make sure you take note of the types of data that are stored in each source. So that means you might be working with structured data. The majority of data that you see or work with is typically structured data and is stored in relational databases. So this is where you'll get your relational data. You might get data from spreadsheets in the form of CSV files, but this data is structured and it already has different pieces of information attached to it. Unstructured data, on the other hand, includes things like images, videos, audio files, maybe some really large unformatted text files. But these types of data, well, they don't really have structure to them. So they're typically stored in places like S3 buckets or other types of object storage. So as you're collecting all of your data sources and you learn what their types are, you figure out how you're going to authenticate with that particular data source. Start thinking about how you're going to collect all of this data into a central location. So a part of your MLOps pipeline that can eventually be automated is this right here, and that's collecting all of the data into one location. So typically, you'll need some way to ingest all of this data, and we'll look at that as we go through this lesson. But another question you'll need to answer is how often you'll have to pull from each source. That might make a determination for how you decide to configure your central location for all of the data. But some sources might be updated every day, where some sources might be updated every week. So that can play a pretty big role in the tooling that you choose to ingest your data. And then, as you learn more about your data, consider creating some type of reference data. And reference data refers to any type of data that we use to classify or categorize other data. So these are things that usually don't change or they change really slowly. So things like units of measure, country codes, the way we format date times, maybe some kind of weight or temperature conversions, things that really aren't going to change very often. So think about making reference data to help make your data from different sources more consistent.